There's a kind of tiredness that gets into a soldier's bones and just lives there. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind they put in films. It's quieter than that. It's the tiredness of doing the same thing 10,000 times until your body does it without you. Polishing boots at midnight. Pressing a tunic so the creases could cut bread. Standing still for hours while your knees argue with you and your mind drifts somewhere far away and your face shows nothing at all. That's the job. People think the guards are about the big moments. They're not. They're about the 10,000 small ones nobody ever sees. My name is Daniel Hale. I served with the Grenadier Guards, and for most of my time in uniform I believed I understood exactly what I was. A pair of strong shoulders, a steady pair of hands, a man who could carry things. I'd carried plenty. Kit that broke other men, stretchers. A mate once when his leg gave out on an exercise in the Brecon Beacons, all 18 stone of him, half a mile through mud that tried to swallow us both. I was proud of my shoulders. I'll admit that now. I thought there wasn't a weight in the world that could surprise them. I grew up in a terraced house in the north, the kind of street where everybody knew everybody and half of them were related. My dad worked the railways until his back went. My mum cleaned offices in town, leaving before it was light and coming home after dark, and I never once heard her complain about it. That's where I learned what I knew about duty, long before any sergeant taught me to march. You did the thing that needed doing. You didn't make a song about it. You got up, you went, you carried what had to be carried, and you kept your face calm so the people relying on you wouldn't worry. That was the whole of it. That was everything. I joined the army at 19 because the railways were gone and the town was emptying out, and I wanted more than anything to be part of something that meant something. I won't pretend it was nobler than that. I wanted to belong to a thing bigger than my own small life. The Grenadiers gave me that. The drill, the history, the bearskin that weighs more than you'd think and makes your neck ache by the end of a long parade. The men beside me who became closer than brothers because you cannot fake the things you share when you've stood frozen together at 4 in the morning. I found my place. I thought I knew the shape of it completely. I'm telling you all this so you understand the man I was the morning everything changed. An ordinary soldier, strong shoulders, steady hands, a calm face. A man who believed he had already learned the limit of what he could carry. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about it in a way I'm still not sure I have the words for, even now, even sitting here trying to explain it to you. But I'll try, because somebody should know what it actually was. Not the version you saw on the television, all gold and music and silence. The other version. The one inside the strap and inside the shoulder and inside the counting of the steps. Let me tell you what it weighed. The news came down the way real news always does in the army. Not with drama, with a list. A name read out, a room told to wait behind, a color sergeant standing at the front of it with a face you couldn't read at all. We knew Her Majesty had died, of course. The whole country knew. The whole world did. There's a particular silence that fell over the barracks that week that I have never heard before or since. A silence that wasn't sadness exactly, or wasn't only sadness, but something heavier and stranger, the feeling of a fixed point in the sky suddenly not being there. She had been there longer than any of us had been alive. Longer than our parents had been alive, most of us. You don't measure a thing like that until it's gone. What we didn't know, standing in that room, was what we were about to be asked. Color Sergeant Reg Coyle let the silence sit for a moment longer than was comfortable, which was his way, and then he told us. The bearer party was being selected. The men who would carry Her Majesty, through the streets, through the Abbey, up the steps at Windsor. In front of the cameras, in front of the country, in front, he said, of the entire watching world. I remember the exact feeling. It wasn't pride, not yet. It was something closer to fear that hadn't decided what to be. A sort of falling sensation, the floor going soft under me. Connor was standing to my left, the youngest of us, 22 and still with that openness in his face that the army hadn't sanded off yet. I heard him breathe out, slow and careful, the way you do when you're trying not to let anyone hear it. Beside him, Liam had gone completely still. Sam, who was older, who'd done 2 tours and never said much about either, just looked at the floor. Coyle wasn't finished. He looked at us, every one of us, one at a time, the way he did when he wanted something to land and stay landed. He said there would be no second chances at this. He said it was the one duty in any of our careers that would still be remembered when we were old men, that would be remembered after we were gone, that would outlast every other thing we ever did in the uniform. He said it would be the most watched few minutes of our entire lives, and that the world would have a very long memory for any man who got it wrong. And then he said the thing he would say to us perhaps 50 times in the days that followed, the thing that started out as the coldest instruction I had ever received and ended up meaning something else entirely. He said it flat, no feeling in it at all. The drill doesn't care how you feel. He let it sit. Your hands can shake. Your eyes can sting. Your heart can do whatever it likes inside your chest, lads, and none of it matters. The drill doesn't care how you feel. You will not feel it. You will execute it. Is that understood? We said it was understood. We didn't understand it at all, not then. You can't. You can only stand in a room and hear words and believe you've taken the measure of them. The measure was bigger than the words. It was always going to be. I think Coyle knew that even as he spoke. I think that's why his face was so carefully empty. He'd carried things himself, things he never talked about, and he knew what we didn't yet know, which is that the worst weights are the ones you agree to carry willingly, with your eyes open, because not carrying them was never something you could live with. Nobody slept much that night. I lay on my bunk in the dark and listened to the small sounds of men who weren't sleeping either, the shift of a body, a cough, somebody's quiet breathing that wasn't the breathing of sleep. I thought about my mum leaving for work before it was light. I thought, this is the thing I joined for, the thing bigger than my own small life. And I thought, God, please, do not let me be the one who falters. Let it be any of the others before it's me. And then I was ashamed of thinking it. And then I understood that every man in that room was thinking exactly the same thing, and somehow that made it bearable. We would carry it together or not at all. Here is the thing no one outside the bearer party will ever fully understand, the thing the cameras could never show, and it is the heart of what I'm trying to tell you. The weight was real, not a feeling, not a metaphor that the speech writers could polish up afterwards. A real, physical, brutal weight, far beyond anything the watching world could have guessed from their sofas. We trained in a quiet place away from any lens, with a practice coffin built to the exact specification, weighted to match. And the first time we lifted it, I felt my whole understanding of my own strength quietly fall apart. Because a coffin like that is lined with lead. It has been done that way for a very long time, for reasons of preservation, and the result is a thing that weighs 1/4 ton or more, 250 kilograms, more than 3 large men. And it does not sit on your shoulder the way Kit does, balanced and packed for carrying. It sits high and wide and unforgiving, and it must be kept absolutely level, absolutely steady, while you walk in perfect time with 7 other men, while you turn, while you climb steps, while every muscle in your neck and your shoulder and your spine screams at you that this cannot be done. And your face above all, shows the world nothing but calm. The first session left my shoulder a deep bruised purple that lasted a fortnight. Connor's hands blistered, and then the blisters tore, and then he wrapped them and lifted again and said nothing, because saying something was not a thing any of us would do. Liam pulled something in his lower back on the 3rd day and went gray trying to hide it, and Coyle saw it, because Coyle saw everything, and Liam was quietly replaced. That was the cruelest part of it, watching a good man taken off the team for an injury he couldn't help, watching his face as he understood he would not be there for the thing he'd already given his body to. He shook every one of our hands. He said, "You carry her properly." That was all. Then he was gone, and a man called Marcus stepped into the gap, and we started again from the beginning, because the timing of 8 men is a fragile thing, and a single new pair of shoulders changes everything. We drilled until it stopped being a thing we did and became a thing we were. We drilled until I could feel, through the wood and the lead and the weight of it, the smallest shift in any other man's stride, the way you can feel a change in the wind without seeing it. Coil drove us without mercy and without a single raised voice, which was somehow worse, and over came the refrain. The drill doesn't care how you feel. We hated it by the end of the first week. We muttered it back at each other in the mess, bitterly, taking the mickey out of it the way soldiers do with anything that frightens them. But there was one evening late, when most of the others had gone, when it changed for me. I was sitting on a bench rubbing my ruined shoulder, and Sam, the quiet older one, sat down beside me without a word. We sat like that for a while. Then he said, "My nan watched the coronation on a neighbor's set in 1953 because they were the only family on the street with a television. Whole street crammed into that front room." He smiled at the floor. 80-odd people who will never know my name are going to watch me carry the same woman to her rest. He was quiet again. Then he said, "I'm not doing it for them, though. I'm doing it because she did her bit for 70 years and never once put it down, and the least I can do is not put it down for the length of a street. That's it. That's the whole of why. I never forgot that. I'm doing it because she never put it down." I think every man on that team had his own version of the same sentence, some private reason that had nothing to do with the cameras and everything to do with what he'd been raised to believe a person owed. We never spoke of it again. We didn't need to. We knew. The morning came the way important mornings always do, too fast and with too much clarity, the world rendered sharper than it has any right to be when you've barely slept. London was cold and very still. There is a stillness that settles over a great city when something enormous is happening, a hush that isn't the absence of sound so much as the presence of millions of people all holding the same breath. I have never heard anything like it. The streets had filled overnight deep banks of people standing silent in the gray light, and yet you could have heard a coin drop on the pavement, a whole city quiet. It does something to you that it presses down. We were up before the dark had fully gone. The rituals of it were small and ordinary, and I clung to them. Boots, tunic, the bearskin settled and checked. The straps that would take some of the load, adjusted and adjusted again, because a strap a half-inch wrong could end a man's strength halfway up a flight of steps. I checked mine 4 times. My mouth was completely dry. I remember running my tongue around it trying to find any moisture and finding none. And I remember thinking, with a kind of distant calm, that I had never in my life been this frightened, and that no part of it could be allowed to show on my face. Coyle came down the line of us. He didn't give a speech. He'd given all the speeches already. He just looked at each man, that flat, unreadable look, and at each man he said 2 or 3 quiet words, and to me he said, "Steady hands, Hale, that's all you are today. Steady hands and a calm face," and I said, "Color Sergeant," and he moved on. Such a small thing. It held me together completely. I had started counting by then. Counting was the thing I'd found, somewhere in the long days of drill, that kept the fear from getting its hands all the way around me. Breaths first. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, the way you settle yourself before anything that matters. Then steps in my head ahead of time, walking the whole route behind my eyes, the number of paces here, the turn there, the steps at the end. I had walked it 100 times in my mind. I walked it once more, standing in the cold, while the city held its breath around us. And then there was no more time for counting ahead, because it was time, and we took up our positions. And the weight came down onto 8 shoulders, and the great doors opened onto the watching world, and we stepped through. I want to tell you what I expected, because it's the part that surprised me most. I expected the world to feel enormous. I expected the crowds and the cameras and the cathedral ceilings and the sheer scale of the thing to come crashing in on me. To press down until I could barely breathe, and I had spent days bracing for that, building walls in myself against the flood of it. I expected, too, the grief. I'd thought it would rise up in me at the worst possible moment, somewhere in the middle of it, and I'd have to fight it down behind my calm and careful face. Neither thing happened. That's the truth of it. The opposite happened. The moment the weight settled fully onto my shoulder and we took the first step, the entire world I had been so afraid of simply shrank away to nothing. It narrowed. It closed down to a space about the size of a man's outstretched arms. There was the strap, biting into my shoulder, real and immediate. There was the man in front of me, the back of his neck, the rhythm of his stride that I could feel through the wood before I could see it. There was the next step, and after it the next. That was the whole of the universe. The crowds, the cameras, the cathedral, the billions of watching eyes, the history of it all, every enormous thing I had braced against, gone, dissolved, irrelevant. There was only the weight and the step and the man in front. And I understood, somewhere in those first paces, a thing I have never quite been able to explain to anyone who wasn't under that weight with me. The only way to honor the moment was to disappear inside it, to make myself nothing. Not Daniel Hale with his frightened heart and his aching shoulder and his private grief. Just a steady point in a line of steady points. A single piece of a thing that had to be perfect, and could only be perfect if no individual man inside it allowed himself to exist. I gave myself up to it. I think we all did at the same instant without a word, the way we'd learned to feel each other's strides. We stopped being 8 men. We became one careful, perfect motion. And in that giving up there was no fear left at all. There wasn't room for it. Coyle had been right about everything. The drill did not care how I felt. And because it didn't, I was free. So when the grief tried to come, and it tried once hard, at a turning where the music swelled and I caught for half a second the scale of what we were doing, I did not fight it the way I'd planned. I simply set it down, not denied it. Set it down gently beside me, the way you'd set down anything heavy you couldn't carry and do your job at the same time. I'll pick you up later, I told it, almost kindly. Not now. Now there is the strap and the step and the man in front. The grief waited. It was patient. It knew, the way I was only beginning to know, that its time would come, and that when it came it would be owed in full. The carry itself is mostly steps and stone in my memory now, but some of it is burned in so deep I'll have it until I die. The weight, always the weight, a living pressure that you do not fight but flow with, redistributing it across yourself 100 times a minute in tiny adjustments no eye could ever see. The cold of the air and the warmth of the effort meeting somewhere on my skin. The unbelievable discipline of keeping it level, dead level, while the ground changed beneath us, while we moved from pavement to threshold to the long aisle, the surface shifting and our feet reading it blind because our eyes had to stay up and ahead and calm. The lowering was the worst of it, and the part the world least understood. To lift a great weight is one thing. To put it down slowly, perfectly, in unison, with control, with every man releasing his hold at the exact same rate, so the thing descends as smooth as water finding its level, that is a different order of difficulty, and it is the place where a tired man's strength most wants to fail him. I felt my arms shaking by then, deep in the muscle, the fine tremor of a body that has given everything. I counted. In my head, slow and steady, I counted the descent, and I felt Sam to my right counting his own, and Connor with his ruined hands holding firm, and Marcus who'd come in late and made himself one of us, all of us lowering as one, and it touched down without a sound, without a falter, exactly as it should, and I let go. And then the steps at Windsor, the ones I had walked 1,000 times behind my eyes. Stone steps with a great weight to be carried up them in perfect time, the single moment in the whole long day where the smallest slip would have been seen by every soul on earth and remembered forever. I will not pretend to you it was anything but agony. My shoulder had nothing left in it, and I asked it for more anyway, and it gave, the way bodies do when the thing being carried matters more than the body. Step. Level, step, level. The refrain in my head now, no longer cold, no longer bitter. The drill doesn't care how you feel. And I understood it at last fully on those steps, what it had really meant all along. It was never cruelty. It was a gift. It was the only thing that could carry a frightened, grieving, exhausted man up a flight of stone with a quarter-ton on his shoulder and not let him fall. The drill didn't care how I felt so that I didn't have to. It held my feelings for me so my hands could stay steady. Coyle had been giving us the kindest thing he had, dressed up as the coldest, because he knew we wouldn't have accepted it any other way. We reached the top. We carried her in. And then, in the quiet place where the world's eyes finally could not follow, the weight came off my shoulders for the last time. I have tried many times to describe what happened in me in that moment, and I have never got it right, but I'll tell you the closest I've come. When a great weight you've carried for a long time finally lifts, your body does a strange thing. It doesn't feel light. It feels, for a few seconds, as though it's still carrying. The shoulders stay braced. The muscles keep their shape. The weight is gone, but the carrying isn't, not yet. It takes the body a while to believe it's allowed to stop. And I stood there with my shoulders still braced around nothing. And the grief I had set down so gently at the turning came back and stood beside me and waited, patient as ever. And I understood finally what the weight had actually been. It was never the lead. The lead was heavy, God knows, the heaviest thing my shoulders ever bore in the plain, dumb arithmetic of pounds and kilograms. But that's not why I tell you it was the heaviest weight of my life. I've worked it out in the years since, on the long nights when I can't sleep. The lead was only the weight my body carried. The real weight, the one that pressed down so much harder, the one I'm still carrying now if I'm honest, was everything the lead was standing in for. 70 years of a woman who never once put her own burden down. The grief of a whole country laid across 8 pairs of shoulders for the length of a street and a flight of steps. The trust of millions that we would not let them down in the one moment they could not bear to be let down. My mother leaving for work before light and never complaining. My dad's broken back. Everything I'd ever been taught about what a person owes and what duty is, and why you carry the thing that has to be carried with a calm face so the people relying on you won't worry. All of it was on my shoulders, and none of it would show on the scale.